All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. I hope you're doing well. So, today I have a Ghislaine Maxwell sealed documents update, followed by a Jussie Smollett update, and then we're going to end with a 9/11 story. Wow, sounds great, right? Okay, so first, the sealed documents. At this point, the absolutely ridiculous saga of the sealed documents. What I'm talking about, most people know, the documents stemmed from a lawsuit between Virginia Roberts and Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine did a 7-hour long deposition. It's a 400-page transcript. She mentioned a bunch of other names that were connected to her life at that time. And then, so they were like, okay, this is sealed forever. And then this new sex trafficking case nightmare arose for Ghislaine, and they said, you know what, I think we might unseal them. And then all of the John Does that were mentioned were like, hey, no, I don't want everyone to know about that whole thing. So can we postpone the unsealing? And then they got a deadline to issue a statement why their names should be left out or it shouldn't come out altogether. I thought that deadline was 2 days ago, so I figured maybe something would happen yesterday. Nothing did, but 5 days ago, a limited portion of the sealed documents are going to be unsealed and given to Alan Underwear On at All Times Dershowitz. The judge wrote, as of 5 days ago, that they're going to allow limited disclosure to Mr. Dershowitz of the sealed documents and testimony that mention Mr. Dershowitz. So people, we've gone from sealed to unsealed to postponement of the sealed to now an unsealing of a portion of the sealed in order for Dershowitz to look at. When I am Alan Dershowitz's age, I hope to be not doing anything like this. I just picture him sternly holding up his underwear with one hand and angrily combing through sex trafficking sealed documents that may or may not include his name. I mean, that can't be where he wanted to end up, right? Also, I heard that Alan Dershowitz is suing CNN for $300 million. Because he said that they chopped up an interview that he did and it made him look like, quote, an intellectual that lost his mind. They did not mention anything about his underwear, but I would guess that it was on and firmly up. Let's see, what else? Oh, yes. So most of my Ghislaine Maxwell videos, I get a couple people saying, where's the mugshot? There is no mugshot. And that's true. There is no mugshot. And I did a video way back when saying that I think it's pretty weird that there's no mugshot and there's also no shot of her being arrested. They said it was a huge convoy with a helicopter. You think some journalist or someone would have been like, that's pretty nuts here in New Hampshire. There's not too many convoys with helicopters arresting people. There's no picture of her being arrested, being transported, being transferred to New York. Maybe it's all because of COVID, but like I said, I get a lot of comments saying there's no mugshot. And I know a little, I guess, something about that question. I think it just gets more confusing the more you look into it, but here is what I do know. So most of you know I went down and waited in line with all the journalists to go to Ghislaine's first court appearance, which was still just through video, so we were watching her on the screen. But when I got there, we waited out in front of the courthouse for hours. And the journalist that covers this for the Daily Mail UK, I was talking to him about it and saying, it's kind of weird that there's no mugshot, right? And he said, no. And all these people have cover all these cases for years. So maybe they're wrong, but I think they at least have some knowledge on the whole thing. So he was saying the feds don't release mugshots of their prisoners. And that it's not weird and that was taken and kind of was run with online, but it's actually normal. And I was like, okay, well, the Takeshi 69, that dude, they didn't do a mugshot, but his first court appearance, there was a picture of him snapped. So I said that to the Daily Mail guy, and he was like, well, let me look. And we looked at that photo, and I think it turns out that that photo wasn't taken that day. And so I was like, okay, I guess it's not weird that there's no mugshot or anything. But then the two lawyers that during the night of riots that threw a Molotov cocktail into the police van and got federal charges, their mugshots were released immediately. And they were staying in the same jail that Ghislaine is currently in, and it's definitely federal charges, and there's definitely mugshots. So it sounds like the feds sort of can choose if they want to release the mugshot. Because like I said, I definitely brought it up when I was standing around all of the reporters for the big papers and things, like, isn't it crazy? And I was made a little bit to feel like a conspiracy theory, like, the YouTuber over here with the mugshot questions, it's normal. And it's like, okay, if the feds don't release mugshots, why are the two lawyers that chucked the Molotov cocktail, why are their mugshots up immediately? I don't get it. It's pretty nuts that also that since COVID, there's no court appearances that she has to go to. And so it's all just on a screen. So still, at this point, pretty bizarrely, there's only about 50 people that have seen her, myself included, and it was only just on a screen. And I would bet my bottom dollar that it was her, but you can't really guarantee. I mean, I do think she's at the jail, but you can't really guarantee that. I feel like they should just walk her out. Just be like, all right, everybody, here she is. I was laughing at the possibility of her. It's just a set, like that white, depressing jail room that she did the appearance in. It's just, she's off in like some tropical island somewhere, and she does the court appearance with her big, brown, oversized suicide shirt, and she just looks sad, and then it wraps up, and she just takes off the crappy brown shirt and has a bikini under it and walks off the set with the depressing lighting and just out in front of a pool, and Epstein's sitting there, and he goes, so how was the court appearance? And she goes, I think it went well, as she sits down in the pool chair, and then a 13-year-old girl brings them 2 drinks served in human skulls, and they cheers. So that's kind of where I've been thinking about it. And so I guess my conclusion on this update was that Dershowitz, underwear up at all times. Allen gets to look at some of the documents. So, good for him. I think I have sealed document fatigue at this point. That's where you've said the word sealed so many times that it no longer means anything, and it's just a funny sound. And I'm having a really hard time caring about these documents. It's just been going on so long. I can't imagine they're worth any of this. We've seen what happens when people are named. They just go, she's a lying prostitute, and I don't remember. But there's the update. Like I said, I think the deadline for the John Does was the 15th of this month, so a couple days ago, so maybe there'll be another one. Or maybe there'll be a full unsealing. But like I said, I'm having a hard time caring. At this point, what will really perk my ears up is arrests. I never thought that they would arrest Ghislaine, so maybe I'm wrong and there'll be more arrests, but that will get me excited at this point. So, moving on. The Jussie Smollett case is back up and running. If you remember, over a year ago, the charges disappeared. Everyone was like, wait, what? Is he guilty? Or he did community service, but it was before the whole thing, just bizarre. The charges disappeared. A retired judge made a filing to have a special prosecutor look at it. Judge Tooman thought, there was a couple reasons that maybe a special prosecutor should look into this. They brought on a guy named Dan Webb to look at the way that Kim Foxx's office handled it. Dan Webb was highly respected as fair. He had actually donated money to Kim Foxx's campaign in the past, so it's not like he had anything against Kim Foxx. And Dan Webb looked at this whole thing for more than a year. I almost forgot about it. I have no idea what took that long. You would think just 8 hours a day looking at all the evidence, a couple months. But it took a year, and he came back, and now there's 6 new charges against Jussie Smollett. So at first, they all went away, and now here we are again. Jussie did his first interview in 2 years. The last interview he did was the classic one where he's on the couch going, "These fear mongers." And I would put it up with Prince Andrew as one of the most just totally insane interviews that I've ever seen. And I just get a feeling of, why would you go on and let them film your face in high definition when the only thing you had was these fear mongers? And so he did another interview. It's pretty lackluster. It was no hard questions, no pressing questions. His attitude now, I'll link it in the description. His attitude now is like, "I'm checked out." Talking about how he has to go to court. He's like, "I don't care about this dog and pony show. I've checked out. This isn't for me anymore." And it's a lot of like, if you really want to understand what happens, you should read more, he said. He's like, the information's out there. You just need to read more. And even though the journalist interviewing him, you could tell is totally on his side, there's more. Even he's like, okay, so they just need to like read more. Just even repeating what Jussie said and trying to be supportive ended up sounding pretty funny. Just, okay, so everybody just needs to read more. All right. That is something where I'll just read up and then maybe we'll get it. Perfect. And so he's like this enlightened Jussie now. "I've been going through this for 2 years." And he said he kind of made fun of himself. That other interview that I was just talking about, he was like, "I would never do an interview where I was crying on a couch again." And he talked about how he doesn't think being silent helped him at all and blah, blah, blah. Like I said, it's not that. I was like, first interview in 2 years. All right, here we go. And then, all right, it's just old Jussie. But something that is mind-blowing in my opinion. Okay, so since Dan Webb took over as special prosecutor, he was, if you remember, I said Judge Tooman is the one that looked at the filing that maybe they should get a special prosecutor, and he was the one that decided, yeah, there's a couple things, the way that Kim Foxx office handled this, that I think we should have this. So he brought in Dan Webb. Well, now Judge Tooman is up for, I guess, re-election or retention. I don't know exactly how it works. But Kim Foxx is one of her best buddies is the person in the Chicago City Council or government that decides which judges should be retained, or they should give a recommendation or whatever that they should be retained. And they pretty much always retain their judges. Well, in this case, Kim Foxx's friend decided that they're not going to support this Judge Tooman. Well, obviously, Tooman came out immediately and said this is simply retaliation for allowing the special prosecutor to take a look at the whole thing. Even the Mayor Lightfoot, I'm pretty sure her name is, came out and was like, yeah, pretty much seems like a retaliation for his decision to bring in a special prosecutor. This is all a Chicago Tribune article that I got this from. And so Tooman said, all right, we need to look at this deeper with a special prosecutor. Well, that made Kim Foxx and her office, I think, really mad. I think they thought, you know what, I'm coming up for re-election. This was in a way, a non-violent crime, I guess. To bring in a special prosecutor, it's just theatrical. I think they thought it was way overblown, and so they sat back in the wings singing, okay, you're going to try to ruin my career, I have a re-election coming up. You have a retention or re-election or whatever it is coming up. And so when it did, Kim Foxx's friend did, for the first time, I think in a really long time, didn't support him. And the craziest part of the whole thing, so that's all happening, that's pretty normal, but the craziest thing that I've heard about this case in a long time is a month ago, they think that a Judge Tooman lookalike showed up to the city council or whatever, pretending to be Judge Tooman, saying, yes, I would like to take my name off the ballot for the upcoming judge retention. And so at this point, I mean, Chicago is just really showing how corrupt and political and disgusting and how deep this whole thing goes. Think a judge lookalike shows up to say, hey, I'd like to take my name off the ballot. And I think someone said, it was just like a tiny little blurb in the Chicago Tribune article about it. And I was like, wait, I want more information on that. A judge lookalike? That, to me, brings the whole thing to a whole nother level of corruption. And that's what Jussie's also using now, is just like Chicago has always been so corrupt, and which it has, and it still is. And therefore, my situation is just Chicago trying to bring down another man. And then everyone is like, yeah, Chicago is real corrupt and always has been, and there definitely needs to be deep-seated changes made, but we still don't believe you, Jussie. I would have loved the interviewer to ask him questions about, like, Chappelle rebranding him as a French actor and the way that his own community laughed at that joke. The way that Jussie was talking, and he wasn't challenged by the interview, it sounded like he's got, his people behind him and all of this stuff. And to have a national treasure like Dave Chappelle, a true thinker with respect, to rebrand you as a French actor, I would have loved to know how he felt about that. And one of the lines that Jussie said was, he goes, a lot of mornings I wake up very angry, and then other mornings, if I squint real hard, I can see the silver lining. I imagine you just like go into Jussie's house and it's just the morning and he's just squinting his eyes off, just, come on, I'm trying to see the silver lining. It's not there. Meanwhile, a look-alike of the judge is like, yes, thank you. I don't want to be a judge anymore, it turns out. So if you could just take my name off the ballot, that sounds great. I am Judge Tooman. That's Toomin. I decided to quit being a judge. Thank you. And he leaves. Just a absolutely bizarre case. Okay. Now we're going to end on... thought of this story because of 9/11, and it's pretty much reminds me of a Jussie Smollett type thing. And so there's a comedian, right? His name's Steve Rannazzisi, and he was living here in New York with his fiancée, working as a recruiter, trying to break into the stand-up comedy community. And when all of the whole thing blew up for him, he did a Howard Stern interview, which I'll link in the description. And he says that, he talks about how hard it was to break into comedy, and you show up to the comedy clubs and people are mean to you, and it's hard. And it's like, yeah, Steve, it is. And so Steve's here in New York, and they decide to move to LA a month after 9/11. And for 9/11, Steve was downtown, close to the Twin Towers. That's the neighborhood where, the jail is where Epstein didn't kill himself and where I saw the Ghislaine hearing, and we've walked around down there. So he was down there in the financial district when it happened. The planes hit, and then I guess he had to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge to safety like a lot of people. And so he, a month after 9/11, him and his either fiance or girlfriend at the time moved to LA. And she gets a job. He says she gets a job pretty much right away. And again, he is left going to the Comedy Store and going to comedy clubs and trying to navigate some respect and some friendships and to get into the tough club to get into of comedians at comedy clubs. And he was saying, like I said, that comedians can be really mean. And yeah, some of them are the best ball busters in the world, and they're not going to let one of their own get away with anything. And so it's hanging around comics can be, especially like bigger ones that you really respect, or, I think you guys get it. So he's saying, I was hanging around the Comedy Store, and I was trying to make friends, and people are really kind of standoffish and mean, and they were talking to him saying, oh, yeah, you just moved from New York, right? And he's like, yeah. And it's like, oh, and like I said, 9/11 happened a month before, and they're saying, oh, so you were, like 9/11 just happened, you were there for that? And he goes, yeah, I was downtown. And they go, whoa, you were downtown. And right in that moment, Steve Rannazzisi, the same way Jussie Smollett made a decision to just, I guess, make up something. I guess for Jussie, it's still allegedly. But in that moment, Steve, as a way to get everyone to not be mean to him or to accept him or to give everybody something to remember about him or whatever it is, pretty much to make his career take off, he goes, in a split second, he goes, I was in the towers. I was in Tower 2. I narrowly escaped it. I was in the tower and I got out, and everybody was like, whoa, that is nuts. You were in the tower. And then and he's going with it. And he talks about on Howard Stern he said it. And then he's sitting there thinking, why did I do that? Oh my God, I need to say it. Just tell him. And then, but he said, 15 seconds, 20 seconds goes by, and then you can't really be like, hey guys, damn, remember like 30 seconds ago when I said I was in 9/11, the horrible attack that killed a lot of people and created fear, unimaginable fear for people, and really destroyed a lot of lives. Remember when I said I was in the building? Well, I actually wasn't. And I was just hoping that you guys would like me and not bust my balls for being the new guy and not being that great at comedy. But instead of doing that, and he says he regrets it for his whole life, which is a good lesson. If you find yourself where you just spit out a completely stupid lie in order to help your career or help people like you or whatever it is, while you're sitting there, just nip it in the bud. That's the lesson from this whole thing, is just say, shit. You know what, guys? I wasn't in 9/11. I was trying to even lie. He could have just said, I was trying to flip it into a joke or something, and it was stupid. I completely apologize. Let him rip on you from that. But anyway, he just sat there and was like, yeah, I was in 9/11. And it all of a sudden, everyone's like, hey, that's crazy. And then when he comes up, it's like, damn, this guy was in 9/11. And people are being nice to him. And the big comedians around the Comedy Store, Pauly Shore, Andrew Dice Clay, start saying hi to him. Hey, bro, how you doing? And he's like, oh, hey. He said that Andrew Dice Clay started calling him T2 for Tower 2. And so as the whole thing is getting bigger, he is going, oh no, this was a horrible idea. And the more people that comedians are like, yeah, meet Steve, he was in 9/11, how crazy is that? And they're like, oh, so he's having to tell this story of like, yeah, I was in 9/11 and I was at the towers and I have these dreams of falling still, and everyone's like crazy. And then it's like, hey, you want to come do my podcast? And it starts to snowball for him, because as a comedian, you got to get yourself out there and start talking and making some jokes on shows and podcasts. And so having someone say, hey, you want to come do my podcast as an up-and-coming comedian is, yes, I have to. It's the only way I'm going to get a community. But because of this totally insane lie, he was left in this hell where every time he would be asked to do something, he would have to think to himself, it's like, oh no, I'm going to have to tell this ridiculous story that I was in 9/11, and more years went by. So we did a couple podcasts, and it was really important to him to just let it die. So he never spoke about it. He ended up getting on a show called The League, which he was on for 6 years, and the cast of The League and all the interviews he did for The League, no one ever asked him about it, and he was thinking, all right, I think it's behind me. His wife and fiance had to go along with it. Yeah, that was another question Howard Stern asked. He's like, how did your wife? And he was like, obviously she went along with it. So imagine that, just your fiance saying like, sorry, babe, told everyone I was in 9/11. So if it ever comes up, just be like, yeah, he was in 9/11. And so that had to have been a nightmare. And like I said, he was on The League. He's got a career going at this point. And The League ends, and Pauly Shore at the time had a show where I think it was called the Pauly Shore stand-up hour or something like that, where he would have comedians on to do stand-up. He would host the show, and that was part of the show. And then the other part of the show is Pauly Shore goes to all of the comedians' houses. He flies to wherever they are and follows them around for the day and interviews them, which is pretty much priceless publicity for a comedian. Not only do you get to go and show off your jokes, but Pauly Shore, legend, comes to your place. The people get to know you. It makes it even better than just a TV appearance for your jokes, because they get to know you, they get to see you, you get more TV time. And so he was saying that all of a sudden, he had been on that show, no one had talked about it, and he had this pit in his stomach of, oh no, Pauly Shore comes from the old days at the Comedy Store. He probably still thinks of me as the 9/11 guy. And what should have been a really happy time in Steve's career, where Pauly Shore's coming out to his house to talk to him, get him some good exposure, and then he gets to go do his jokes on the show. And so, sure enough, Pauly Shore, it's one of the things that he remembers about Steve, asked him about it, and Steve had to tell the story again. Imagine how much that just eats you inside. The truth just feels better. And so he's telling this story, I was in 9/11, and then he was telling Howard, like, I should have just demanded that they not put that in, or I should have had my agent call him and say, don't put that part in. He's trying to move on. But he didn't feel like he could do that without it looking suspicious, so that was in. And then I think there was another podcast, and at some point, Steve hit a wall with it, and he was having a baby, and he said, which this I think is pretty respectable. He goes, I can't do this anymore. I can't look my new kid in the face while I'm just living a lie. I'm done living a lie. And you can tell, at least in my opinion, Jussie Smollett is still just in that toxic, just slogging through the living a lie nightmare. And so he said, you know what, Steve goes, I'm going to tell my friends and family. And so he did, and came out to his friends and family and said, I told everyone I was in 9/11. And I feel like an idiot. And he felt like he came clean, and maybe that would be over. And after a period of time, Howard points out it had to have been either a friend or family, someone that he had told, called the New York Times, told them the story, said, look, this comedian, even though he came out and he admitted to it. There's a good chance telling everyone he's in 9/11 kicked off his career. So then the New York Times did a story on it. And then I think Steve really did the right thing by immediately, right after the New York Times story went out and he was really just getting slammed by everybody as the 9/11 boy, he went on Howard Stern, which is an interview that they're not going to pull any punches or try to save you. Pretty much the opposite of the interview Jussie Smollett did, where it's just someone that is not going to challenge him or anything. I think Howard and Robin do a really good job. At one point, Howard goes, "Do you think you're mentally disturbed?" And Steve goes, "Well, I don't know if mentally disturbed is the..." But they don't hold back. So it took 14 years of living that lie before finally it all is out. He did the interview where he got beat up a little bit. There's the New York Times article that if you Google his name, it's still right there, stamped on his permanent record for the rest of his time. And I really do feel, as bad as that is to kick off your whole career with 9/11, there's still some respect in coming clean, and it took 14 years. So it'll be interesting to see if old Jussie ever has that moment, or if it would be better for him and his whole emotions and everything, I think, to do a real type of interview, maybe after his case is done, and just start moving past this whole thing. He said, he goes, "My mom said that the quickest way for, I guess, the man or whatever to discredit your work would be to make the people that your work is for," which I think is the black community, "hate your work." So that's where Jussie and his family are, is the man is trying to make Jussie's extremely mediocre music that, I don't know, it's all right, but no, I don't think anyone really is falling down over how great his work is. So they think that this is a giant thing to make the people that his work is for not like it. That's pretty nuts. I think I'm going to cut it off there. Hopefully there's no judge lookalike scandals in the Ghislaine case. That's all we need. Or it's like, yeah, these documents are lookalikes too. Anyway, I'm going to cut it off there. I hope you guys are all doing well. I will see you next time. Why? Steven Y. Shum.